All right. Hello, my name is Sarah Yost, and I'm really sorry that I'm not able to be there today. Um, let's see if I can move this. What's happening here? I think I should. Okay, yeah. Let's move me up here. All right. Okay, hi. My name is Sarah Yost, and I'm utilizing technology to try to still give this presentation, even though, sadly enough, my grandmother passed this morning, and so I have had to fly home to Iowa to be with my mother and my family there, and I'm sad that I'm going to be missing ESET 2 in Madisonville. Um, but this is my presentation on HyperDocs, and I'm super excited to share this instructional strategy with you all. So if you could, please go to the link right here on the screen. I also have the QR code if that's your style, if you prefer to use your device for QR codes. You could go that way, or you could just type in the shortened link on the screen to on your desktop. Because I think we're in a computer lab, and access the HyperDoc that way. Give me just a second to get there. And whoever is helping facilitate, if you could, just please pause and allow folks a minute to get there. And if everybody's ready, then we can move on. Okay. All right, here we are over in the HyperDoc. Okay, so HyperDocs are amazing. I mean, I cannot even tell you enough good things about how HyperDocs have transformed my instruction. What HyperDocs do is they make it possible to, let's see here, to truly differentiate. You're always going to have students with a variety of different needs. Every classroom is heterogeneous. And HyperDocs allow you to put the time in ahead of time, before class, to kind of intentionally design your instruction for a variety of different learners, groups of learners, so that in the moment when students are working through these HyperDocs alone or in groups, you as the teacher are able to move around and work with the individual students who need your help more easily. So whether those needs are socio-emotional or behavioral or whatever that may be. Okay, so in this HyperDoc, what I'm going to do today is just kind of walk through the HyperDoc with you and then set you free to work on your own. Normally, of course, we would work maybe in each section and then come back together and discuss. But since I'm not there to facilitate a discussion, I'll just kind of stop the recording after I've walked you through all this. And the rest of the time can just be you playing and working through the HyperDoc and trying to use the time so that it's meaningful for you and your students. Okay, so I made a HyperDoc for this presentation so that you teachers could experience what it feels like as a student to move through the HyperDoc. And that can hopefully help you when you go to actually plan how to use a HyperDoc yourself. So a HyperDoc is any document. It could be a Google Doc like this. It could be a slideshow. It could even be like an Excel or a Google Sheet. And it just gives you, it allows you to shape your instruction, guide students through it, and embeds links to various resources to support and enhance their learning. So this is a template. I did not invent this specific HyperDoc. I will show you where I got it and where millions, well, I shouldn't say millions, myriad other templates are for your use and modification. So I just plugged in our useful information and resources for designing this professional learning. And you can do the same for your students. So in phase one, these first 10 minutes, this is sort of like where you're going to be igniting your students' curiosity, engaging them, building their background knowledge, that sort of thing, launching the HyperDoc. So obviously, this is a conference on equity, and so I thought that the HyperDoc was the perfect vehicle to talk about equity. We're all familiar with this graphic, equality versus equity, or probably are, and the difference between the two. And so we're trying with the use of HyperDocs to give students, all students, regardless of their needs, the tools and the supports that they need to be able to access learning at a high level. So whether they're gifted and talented students who need that extra extension or acceleration, or whether they are special ed students who need specific accommodations, or whether they are students who have various socio-emotional or intellectual needs, whatever the case may be. The HyperDoc really allows you to tailor instruction to meet your student needs, and then also frees you up in the moment so that you can sit with individual students or groups of students and further support their learning. Okay, so when you come into the HyperDoc, you'll notice that you have view-only access. And I'd really recommend starting with sharing a link to your Google Doc to your HyperDoc that has view-only access. And the reason for that is until you get more experience as a teacher and until your students have more experience using HyperDocs, you're not going to want them all in the same document, editing and possibly deleting or writing funny things, or in other ways sort of sabotaging the HyperDoc for the other kids. So if you create a view-only document and then you teach your students, you go to File. Let me just move myself over here. You go to File, Make a Copy, and then it'll say Copy of your HyperDoc, and just train your students to add their last name. And then they will save it in whatever file you have created in Google Classroom, or they can save it to their own file and then share it with you. But just for management's sake, I highly recommend utilizing Google Classroom and having them share that there, because it's really excellent in terms of how it organizes things. But that is really for another presentation. So once they have a copy of the HyperDoc, they can each edit their own copy, which again is really where I recommend starting until you get more experience and your students really get more experience and see the value in this and understand how it works. You're really going to have to, at least I had to with all different levels of learners, walk them through how to use the HyperDoc before sort of setting them free. Okay, so even just explaining like the general idea of what it is. It's a document that guides their learning. They should follow the steps. They need to follow the links, and they need to do all the activities before moving forward. Seems very obvious, but a lot of students felt overwhelmed initially because I used HyperDocs, fittingly when I had a sub in the classroom, is one way I utilized them. And the first time I hadn't really spent a ton of time pre-teaching because I didn't know I was going to be out, and I didn't do Screencastify as I'm doing with you all, and I probably should have. And a lot of the kids, it was a gifted class, and so I thought that they would be able to handle it, but they felt overwhelmed and they weren't really clear on what to do. So you definitely want to take some time to walk them through it. So you teachers as learners are going to move through each of these steps, starting by watching the video, and then listing the groups of students you need to differentiate for in your own classroom. Then you'll go to this Padlet, which is a shared document. And on the Padlet, you will answer the question. So you're going to list some barriers to differentiation in your classroom. So if you've never used Padlet before, everyone will be in the same document. You push this pink plus symbol. You can title it with your name, or I would recommend titling it with your name. And then you're going to write something. What's a barrier to differentiation? And then you'll put it in there. Oops, not using pick file, just enter. And it's already there. So you can then respond to others as you see them. And